Hi, Assalamualaikum. So today we are going to continue the subtopic 11.3, the type of immunity. The immunity divided into two types, the active immunity and passive immunity. What does it mean from the active immunity? It means that the lymphocyte will produce their own antibodies as a response to stimulation by the antigen. Meanwhile, the passive immunity means that the body receives the antibodies from an external sources. Both of these types of immunities can be naturally or artificially acquired. For the natural active immunity acquired after an individual recovers from infection. Meanwhile, the artificial active immunity acquired when an individual is given a vaccine injection. For the natural passive immunity acquired through the breastfeeding and also from the mother to the fetus during pregnancy. Last one is the artificial passive immunity acquired through an antiserum injection. As additional tip for you, you can remember the example for each type of immunity. The infection is an example for the natural active immunity. Meanwhile, the vaccination or immunization is an example for the artificial active immunity, and the maternal is the example for the natural passive immunity, and last one is the antibody transfer is the example for the artificial passive immunity. The active immunity and passive immunity. Active immunity when the antibodies are produced naturally by the lymphocyte, and the advantage is the active immunity remains for a long period of time in our body. For the natural active immunity, we can get when someone is infected by pathogen, the lymphocyte will produce antibodies as a response to this antigen. So when the individual recovers from the infection, so that individual will gain a permanent immunity against the disease. When this individual is attacked again by the same pathogen, so the lymphocyte that have stored the memories of the pathogen suddenly or rapidly will produce the antibodies to react immediately against the antigen. This is about the artificial active immunity. The function is to protect oneself from being infected by a highly infectious disease, so that the individual can be immunized against the disease. What is immunization? Immunization refers to the process that will stimulate our immunity against a specific disease through vaccine injection. Vaccine is a suspension of pathogens that are weakened, dead, or non-virulent. It is not harmful to our body. When a vaccine is injected to the body, the vaccine will stimulate the lymphocyte to produce antibodies to fight the pathogen. The first vaccine injection will usually result in a low level of antibody production, means it's not sufficient to protect the individual from the disease. A booster dose is needed to increase the antibody production so that it can increase the level of immunity and protect the individual from the disease. If the individual is infected by actual pathogen, the lymphocyte will produce enough antibodies and immediately destroy this pathogen. Here are the examples of the vaccine, such as the BCG and HPV. Passive immunity. The body does not produce its own antibodies. These antibodies are obtained from an external source. The passive immunity does not persist and can only give immediate, short-term and temporary protection. For the example, natural passive immunity is acquired by a fetus when the mother's antibody diffuses through the placenta into the blood flow of the fetus. The second example, the antibodies also protect the baby from the first few months after birth through the antibodies that found in their mother's milk or colostrum when breastfeeding. This is the artificial passive immunity. The immunity is acquired through an antiserum injection or serum that contains specific antibodies to fight the specific antigen. This antiserum injection will give immediate protection, but only for a short period of time. The example of the anti-serum are anti-tetanus, anti-rabies, and anti-serum for the poisonous snake. This is the comparison between artificial active immunity and artificial passive immunity. Both immunity will protect the body from infectious disease. Both immunity also involve the interaction between antibodies and antigens. This is the differences between artificial immunity and the artificial passive immunity. The artificial active immunity were acquired through vaccine injection. Meanwhile, the artificial passive immunity acquired through anti-serum injection. The vaccine is a suspension of pathogens that are weakened that are non-virulent. Meanwhile, the anti-serum is a serum that contains specific antibodies. The purpose of the artificial active immunity will act as a prevention. Meanwhile, in the artificial passive immunity, it will act as a treatment or when immediate protection is required. The artificial active immunity do not give immediate protection, but the artificial passive immunity will give immediate protection. The immunity period in the artificial active immunity is lasts for a long period of time. Meanwhile, the immunity period in the artificial passive immunity is temporary and does not persist. The vaccine injection is administered before being infected, but the antibody injection is given in the advance if there is a high risk of infection or immediately after being infected by a disease. The antibodies are produced by the lymphocytes in the artificial active immunity. Meanwhile, the antibodies are obtained from the anti-serum in the artificial passive immunity. The artificial active immunity needs the booster dose. Meanwhile, for the artificial passive immunity, is only given when the antibody level in the blood drop below the level of immunity and the patient is still infected by the disease. What is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS? The human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, is a virus that attacks the human immune system. HIV infection will cause the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS. An AIDS patient is easily infected by other disease because the progressive destruction of individual immune system. The HIV spread in the lymphocyte and destroy the lymphocyte. An individual infected with HIV does not show any symptom for the first few years, although HIV has been actively attacking the immune system. The symptoms of this disease only visible after 8 to 10 years. Since the immune system of individuals are early weakened, so the body can be easily infected by disease. Finally, the immune system is paralyzed and the patient will die from other infection. The HIV transmission can occur through the transfer of body fluids such as the blood and the semen or across the placenta. The woman infected with HIV can transfer the virus to the baby during pregnancy, birth, or breastfeeding. HIV infection in the fetus and newborn baby can be avoided with a proper medical treatment when the mother is pregnant and during birth. The individual can be infected by HIV through unprotected sexual relation with an infected individual. They also can be infected when they share contaminated needles used to inject drugs or tattoo ink. The HIV is also spread through HIV-infected blood transfusion.